London, MI6 black site, 26 minutes after the broadcast, Justin Hammer sat slumped in a steel chair, arms cuffed behind his back, knees swollen and throbbing from weeks of stress, overuse, and untreated inflammation. He was dressed in a crumpled designer suit, the once crisp lines now creased and dirty. His once perfect hair was slicked back with nervous sweat. His signature smugness, gone. Across the table, a British intelligence officer clicked a pen 3 times, slowly, deliberately. "Mr. Hammer," she said with a clipped accent, "I suggest you start explaining why your name is plastered across a global war crimes confession." Hammer tried to smile. The old grin, the boardroom charm. But his lips barely twitched. "Look, I don't know what Osborne said, but he's trying to save his own ass, right? Throw everyone else under the bus. Classic narcissist move." The agent leaned forward. "We've corroborated the data dump. Your name's on the fund transfers. The cybernetics project in Zagreb. That was your tech. And the failed augmentation trials in Manila. Your signature's on the shipment manifest." Hammer's voice cracked. "I was funded to innovate. Everything I did was under military contract. You think I wanted those freaks dying in labs? I was building a future. A safer world. With cooler weapons." He winced as he shifted, as his knees flaring like fire. The agent didn't blink. "You tested unapproved tech on war orphans. You tried to implant neural jacks into live children. And now, your old friend Norman just spilled every rotten secret you ever tried to bury." Hammer laughed bitterly. Norman was supposed to die in that lab. The Mandarin promised. He froze. Too late. The room went still. The agent arched a brow. "The Mandarin." Hammer swallowed hard. "No. Nothing. Too much stress. I misspoke." She stood up, walked to the mirror behind him, and tapped her earpiece. "Get London Cell E on Mandarin Intel recovery. Track all recent Hammercom calls. Scrub his last 48 hours. If he's lying, bag everyone he's ever spoken to. We finally have a lead on the Mandarin after all these years. Don't lose." She turned back, cool and deadly. "You're not a businessman anymore, Mr. Hammer. Your evidence." Hammer slumped forward, chest heaving. "Shit." A few minutes later, the room had been quiet for too long. Justin Hammer sat there alone, bathed in the cold glow of overhead fluorescence. His breathing had slowed, but his nerves hadn't. Every creak of the hallway, every buzz of static from the security panel made him flinch. The lights flickered once. He looked up, flickered again, then went out. Total darkness. Hammer's breath hitched in his throat. Hello. The emergency backup lights kicked in with a dim red hue, and then he saw it. A silhouette, standing in the corner of the room. Perfectly still. As if it had always been there. Unblinking. Unmoving. A black suit. Matte. A faceless mask over the figure's head, featureless except for 2 small slits where I should be. Hammer's voice cracked. "What the hell?" The figure stepped forward. No sound of footsteps. The metal cuffs around Hammer's wrists rattled as he struggled against them. You can't be here," he stammered. "This is MI6. You can't just walk in." The voice that answered was modulated, barely human. "You are nothing but a liability now." Hammer blinked. Wait, we had a deal. I did everything he asked. I kept quiet. I mean, it was just a slip of the tongue. I didn't tell them anything about the shadow rings or Howard's assassination plan." The figure didn't respond. Then, movement. A silver blur of light. A glint of steel arced forward, too fast for Hammer to react. SCHK, the sound wasn't loud, but the warmth was immediate. Hammer looked down and saw the blade sticking out of his chest, angled perfectly through his heart. The blood started to spread, slowly at first, then faster, trickling across his shirt like ink on canvas. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. "You talk too much." Another flash of movement. Swish, his head rolled clean off his shoulders, hitting the floor with a wet thud, eyes wide in shock, mouth still twitching. A geyser of blood sprayed against the wall in a red arc. The assassin stood still for a moment, watching the body slump sideways after a little bit of jerking like a headless chicken. His blade was dripping with blood. He reached back, about to sheath the sword into its spine mount, until every sense screamed, danger. Close. Immediate instinct told him to run, but his muscles wouldn't respond. Something cold pressed against the base of his neck, metal. Then came a voice, male, low, and calm, right behind his ear. I came here to get info out of Hammer, but what was that about an assassination plan on Howard Stark? The assassin didn't breathe, his hand twitched, fingers brushing the hilt of his second blade, but the pressure at his neck shifted, just enough to remind him, one wrong move, and his spine would separate from his skull before the thought even finished forming. The assassin didn't blink, didn't twitch. But his lips moved ever so slightly. A click, faint, almost imperceptible. Poison pill, he muttered, recognizing the signs too late, but nothing happened. The assassin's body jolted slightly, then froze, his fingers twitched once. Twice, then, nothing. No foaming at the mouth. No blue lips. No convulsions, just confusion in his eyes. The man behind him tilted his head. Huh. Looks like your little cyanide cocktail had expired. How the fuck did you become an assassin? Using expired products is bad for health. The assassin's eyes widened. He tried to move, but his body failed him completely. Limbs sluggish, vision blurry. The skin around his jaw began to flush red, but not in the way it should. The toxin had been neutralized before it could activate. The assassin's knees buckled as he fell forward, hitting the floor. Shoo. That fading feeling. That's your nervous system going on vacation. You'll wake up. Probably. He glanced toward the corner. Bring the bag. Two widows emerged silently from the hallway, out of their invisible mode. Looks like Norman wasn't the only one who was after your dad's life, one said. Well, fucking Mandarin. I shut him down years ago. Now it would seem that he has crawled back and is targeting Dad again, Tony sighed. Tag him, strip all gear, lock out every nerve point. I want him untouched until Melina gets her hands on him. He's not to say a single word until then. Understood. Understood, they echoed in unison. They moved quickly, efficiently. One widow lifted the assassin's body while the other gathered his weapons into a sealed nanite case. Tony turned and looked at the remains of Justin Hammer. The blood. The head. The look of stunned betrayal was still frozen on his lifeless face. You could have just kept your mouth shut, Hammer, he muttered. But no. You had to be you. Justin dying right now was bad for Shadow Legion's reputation. Tony didn't want the public or the authorities to think of them as cold-blooded murderers. He wanted to use the CCTV footage, but there was none. The assassin had destroyed it before entering the place. So, Tony used Hermes to create fake footage and voices. For the AI, it was child's play. He opened his palm. The nanites formed a tiny USB with the fake footage of one of the corrupt MI6 agents killing Hammer. He placed the drive on the table, then they disappeared into the shadows. As for where are the agents, well, the assassin blasted a bomb right outside the place before infiltrating. So, the agents were busy tackling the problem. And the few guards who were inside were put to sleep using sleeping gas. 2 hours later, location, U.S. military black site, Eastern Seaboard, status, critical, Operation Internal Storm, in progress. Red alert sirens echoed through the compound. Floodlights lit the base like a battlefield, and the heavy thrum of helicopters vibrated the air overhead. Inside the facility, a small army of military police, U.S. Marshals, and federal tactical teams moved with precision through reinforced corridors. The president's order had been clear: bring me General Thaddeus Ross. Alive. Before the Shadow Legion gets their hands on him. Although no one knew about the Shadow Legion before tonight, the fact that they have found so much information about the corruption so quickly was enough to rattle them. Right now, everyone was afraid, thinking about their little misdeeds and misuse of power, and fears that they might get publicly exposed. The only way to minimize the damage was to get Ross alive and get all secret files and records from him before the Legion. Or else, the entire government will collapse if that information gets exposed. But Ross wasn't going quietly. Command room, level 3, General Ross stood at the center of the chaos, a full tactical vest strapped over his uniform. A heavy-duty custom sidearm rested in his holster, while encrypted hard drives were being loaded into a reinforced briefcase behind him. He barked into his comms. Status on exfil route Bravo. A voice crackled over the channel. Compromised. The extraction helicopter was intercepted. We're rerouting to the secondary bunker. Ross slammed his fist into the console. Damn it. We are not losing this base. Aid, sir, the president declared you rogue. The chain of command has collapsed. Orders are coming directly from the Oval. Ross pulled his gun and fired a round into the console beside the ade's head. Sparks exploded from the monitor. I am the chain of command. Alarms wailed, gunfire echoed through the corridors as federal tactical forces breached the outer layers of the facility. Screams and chaos followed in their wake. Smoke. Blood. The stench of gunpowder and desperation. General Thaddeus Ross paced like a caged animal, his lips curled into a sneer, eyes burning with rage. Alpha team is down. Echoes flanked. We're bleeding, sir. Ross ignored the comms chatter. He turned to the reinforced steel vault at the back of the room, protected by biometric scanners and 6-inch titanium locks. Project Goblin, authorized access only. He yanked the keycard from around his neck, slammed it into the reader, and shoved his thumb against the scanner. The machine whirred. Clicked. Then hissed as steam vented from the seals. Sir, what the hell are you doing? Barked a colonel at his side. That wing is sealed for a reason. You can't let them out. Our men are still out there. Ross pulled his pistol and shot the men in the head. No one questions me, he growled. The heavy door slid open. A wave of cold air swept over the area, and with it, the scent of rot. Chemicals. Death. Inside, subterranean vault. Project Goblin. Rows of containment pods lined the chamber. Frosted glass. Tubes and wires. Each pod held a human-shaped figure, malformed, twisted, barely alive. They were the G-serum rejects. The failures Ross had never discarded. Mutated, rabid, kept sedated and contained in the deepest level of the base. Broken things made from broken science. Some had extra limbs. Others had exposed bone, unformed jaws, or eyes that glowed the wrong color. Their minds were gone, but their strength off the charts. Ross planted explosives inside their brain, so if they fall, they will explode and take down the enemies with them. Ross pulled the emergency override lever. A klaxon blared. Project Goblin, containment override, initiated. Pods hissed. Liquid drained. Locks disengaged. What the hell are you doing? Someone shouted over Ross' earpiece. Ross answered calmly, like a man lighting his own house on fire to spite his enemy. I'm leveling the field. The first pod opened. A low growl echoed, then another, snarling. Twisting. The sound of claws scraping metal and bone cracking into new shapes. Dozens of creatures began to move. Some limped. Others leapt immediately to the walls. The hallway lights flickered, then failed. Darkness swallowed the interior of the base until glowing eyes began to appear in the black. Low, wet snarls echoed down the corridors. Then came the screeches. Mutated throats tearing through the silence like banshees. The creatures of Project Goblin were awake and hungry. They poured out of the vault, malformed limbs carrying them across walls, ceilings, and floors with horrifying speed. Flesh sloughed from parts of their bodies where regeneration had failed. Muscles twitched violently beneath transparent skin. Teeth jutted from jaws at impossible angles. Bones cracked audibly as their bodies readapted to motion after years in suspension. The first soldier they reached didn't even have time to scream. A claw punched through his chest like wet paper. Blood exploded from his mouth as the creature tore his body in half, each chunk flung into opposite walls. One of the beasts pounced onto a group of federal agents, its body a blur of motion. It grabbed two men by the heads and smashed them together like coconuts. Skulls shattered. Red mist sprayed across the corridor. Another creature, hunched and oozing black bile from its back, dragged itself forward on arms twice as long as its torso. It lunged at a squad, and its spine extended midair, stabbing through three men in a single motion like a fleshy harpoon. Their screams were short, their bodies convulsing as the creature jerked its spine back, pulling them into a bloody pile. Panicked gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. But bullets barely slowed the monsters. One soldier unloaded an entire magazine into the chest of a snarling goblin. The thing didn't stop, it only screamed louder, then grabbed the man by his jaw and ripped it clean from his face. Blood sprayed the walls. Boots slipped in the gore. Radio comms filled with terrified screams and static. Fall back. Fall back. A soldier rounded the corner too late. A beast the size of a bear slammed him into the wall, again and again, until the only thing left was red pulp and shattered armor. The thing sniffed at the ruin, then let out a low, pleased growl. In the mess hall, survivors tried to regroup, barricading the entrance. It didn't matter. One of the goblins hurled itself through the reinforced window, body twisting midair, claws outstretched. It landed in the center of the group and erupted in an explosion of claws and teeth. Flesh hit the floor in chunks. Organs spilled like burst fruit. A soldier tried to crawl away with no legs. The creature dragged him back, chewing through his midsection like a feral dog. Elsewhere, a camera feed caught a goblin skittering upside down along the ceiling, then dropping silently into a communications room. The operators inside didn't notice until it was too late. Blood painted the monitors. One man's scream was cut off as his entire upper half vanished into the monster's maw. Ross moved through the lower passageways as the slaughter spread. His boots echoed against the metal floor, the wails behind him growing louder. He didn't flinch. Behind him were 4 of his remaining loyalists and special operatives in full combat armor. They dragged encrypted drives and portable black boxes filled with damning intel, ensuring that if Ross escaped, the truth never would. He reached the secret hatch, a blast door hidden behind an old generator housing. One of the men keyed in the access code. The door hissed open. Ross turned one last time to listen to the chaos he'd unleashed. Screams. Roars. Gunfire turning to wet gurgles. He smiled. They wanted monsters, he said. Now they get them. He stepped into the dark tunnel beyond. The hatch sealed behind him, and back in the base, the final screams were fading, replaced only by the sound of flesh tearing, bones snapping, and the relentless growls of horrors that were never meant to see the light again. A few minutes later, the skies churned with smoke and flame as Tony hovered in midair. Beside him were Yelena and 6 widows. The HUD in his helmet flickered with red alerts, casualty markers, biosign scans, hostile signatures. Below, the black site was a massacre. Bodies were strewn like broken puppets. Blood slicked the walkways. Some creatures still tore through the remains, screeching, their bodies slick with gore. The air stank of iron and charred flesh. Tony's eyes narrowed as the scanner pinged targets. 50 hostiles. Genetically unstable. Enhanced durability. Neural detonators embedded. 30 friendly tactical assets. Condition, critical. 1 confirmed escape, Ross. Submarine class, V6 breaching East Tunnel. Shit, he muttered. He opened the comm line. Yelena, Ross is running like the coward he is. He just left in a stealth sub through the East Tunnel. Intercept him. Now. Copy that, Yelena's voice snapped back. I'll get that bastard. Her armor adjusted in flight, boosters flaring as she peeled off toward the cliffs where Ross's sub-tunnel emerged. A faint sonic boom followed her. No. We need that bastard alive. Tony continued to scan the area. TSK, fine, Yelena replied. Tony turned to the rest of his team. 6 widows hovered beside him in perfect formation, their stealth-class nanite armor rippling with light distortions and bristling with advanced weapon modules. He pointed down. There are 30 survivors. 50 targets. And these freaks got bombs in their head. 1 headshot too hard and they'll take everyone around them with it. He adjusted his visor. Recalibrating the kinetic thresholds for controlled engagements. 2 of you stay in the sky. The rest follow me. We'll fling them up in the air, and number 1 and 2 will blast them with full power. Simple, right? Let's go. He dropped from the sky like a meteor. The widows followed. Tony hit the ground with a bang, repulsors flaring to cushion the impact. The concrete cratered beneath his boots. All around, the mutated goblins shrieked, drawn by the noise, their malformed limbs twitching in anticipation. Tactical forces. Fall back. Leave these monsters to us, Tony's voice boomed. The soldiers had no choice but to fall back because they knew their limits and saw what those monsters could do. Their weapons have no effect on those monsters' bodies. And considering their situation, they decided to do as told just to survive. Fall back. Team F. The leader yelled. Target acquisition. Hermes activated the auto-target mode. 50 red markers lit up. Light em up, Tony growled. The widows dropped in behind him like ghosts with guns. As the creatures rushed, Tony fired a wide-beam repulsor blast at the ground in front of them. Pure kinetic force lifted 4 goblins straight into the air. Then he fired multiple repulsor beams to push them further into the sky. Now. 2 widows targeted the airborne abominations with guided micromissiles. The explosions lit the sky in bursts of orange and green flame. Goblin bodies disintegrated midair, raining burnt meat and bone fragments. Another pack charged. A widow in red pivoted, tossing a pulse grenade that stuck to one goblin's chest. The blast launched it skyward, where Tony met it with a double repulsor blast, shredding its midsection. Another widow activated her anti-grav boots, skating across the blood-slick ground. She slid beneath a lunging goblin, stabbed a plasma blade into its stomach, and kicked it up toward her teammate, who finished it with a high-yield explosive dart straight to the head. Boom. Gone. Tony's systems locked onto another cluster. 8 of them, forming a semicircle around trapped survivors. Clear the field, he ordered. 3 widows flew toward them. Their suits shifted to brawler mode. Their gauntlets turned bright red, and the suit's defense increased 5 times, and their speed increased by 2 times. In the blink of an eye, they punched those monsters into the sky. Mid-air, engage. Tony and the other 3 took to the air. Missiles streamed from their gauntlets. Each strike was surgical, blast to dismember, detonation time just before impact to avoid triggering the neural bombs. The monsters burst like overripe fruit. Another creature tried to charge the wounded soldiers behind Tony. He didn't hesitate. He fired a high-density sonic pulse. The goblin collapsed, ears and eyes bleeding, twitching violently. A widow flew toward it with a glowing plasma sword and severed its head before kicking it into the air as Tony blasted it with his repulsor blast. Lift, blast, repeat. Toss them up. Blow them apart. 1 widow caught a creature midair with a grappling tether, spun it like a flail, and slammed it into 3 others before detonating a thermite charge on its corpse. Within 2 minutes, all the monsters died. Tony looked around. Even though he saved the remnant of the tactical force, there were so many who didn't survive. Many injured and well. Too much blood and gory. TSK. That lunatic. To think he has a horde of monsters like this. There was no information about this in the system or his personal files. Probably analog storage or files. Limitation of technology, huh? Tony activated his bio-nanites.